Okay, I had it on earlier. Sorry. Um, Anyways, my bad. It wasn't Chris's fault this time. Um, it's never Chris's fault. Actually, it's usually always my fault. Glad to see you guys back. I know we have several that are traveling right now, that are out of town, maybe gone home for Thanksgiving. Are y'all ready for Thanksgiving? By the way, anybody ready for Thanksgiving? We're ready for Christmas here at the lumber yard. They got Christmas trees and lights and everything, all that. So they're having a big Christmas party here next week. So. It's not even Thanksgiving, and we're already ready for Christmas, it looks like. But are you ready for Christmas? You're not one of those that like been ready for, I mean, have you bought everything for Christmas already? Are you just ready for it? Have you got lights up? Have you put your tree up yet? Taylor, you got everything ready? You're ready, huh? Anyways, we're ready for Thanksgiving, and we've been talking about being thankful. What are some giving thanks for the things that God has done in our life, and so we've kind of spent a couple weeks on that, so we're gonna kind of wrap that up tonight, so taking it a little different direction, but wrap it up tonight. And when I was in college. Which was many, many moons ago. But when I was in college, I couldn't really have a job because I played a sport. So I had to do like just kind of odd things, So I delivered a newspaper. You don't know what those are anymore, but because they're not really in circulation that much anymore. But I delivered USA Today. It was a weekly newspaper. It wasn't on the weekend back then. It was just Monday through Friday. So I would get up at like 1 o'clock. This is no lie. I'd get up at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I shared it with another baseball player, so we didn't have to do it every night. I didn't have to do it every night. But I'd get up at 1 o'clock in the morning. Like 1 week I'd do 3 days, and then the next week he would do the 3 days, and so we would just kind of swap it. But I'd get up at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd get out to where I had to pick my papers up around 1:30 or 2. And it took me 3 hours. I don't know why I remember all this. It was almost 30 years ago. But it took me like 3 hours to get the paper route done. I had about 50 deliveries I had to make. Some were home deliveries. Some were, I'd have to fill the stands. You don't know what those are. But they used to have, back in the day, they had paper stands where you'd have to put quarters in and then open the door and then you get a paper out. Or if you're not honest, you take as many papers as you want out. But so I had like 50 of those places that I had to go. And there was a couple hotels I had to go and deliver like one paper. And I would be done around 4 or something like that, 5. I'd go back to the dorm and try to get some sleep before my 8 o'clock class. I usually had 8 o'clock class. So that was my work experience in college, and it paid pretty good for the day. But anyways, it never failed. Every time I had to go to, I think it was a Comfort Inn, and we lived in Lebanon, or went to college in Lebanon, and there was a Comfort Inn right by the interstate, and there was some lady, like mean old lady. I hate to say it that way, but she was. So she was sitting at the counter every morning. I would get there. It doesn't matter what time I got there. It doesn't matter if nothing mattered. Every time I'd walk in. I just had one paper I had to give her, and then I'd leave. I'd walk in and lay it on the desk, and she'd say, "You're late." In that kind of a grovelly voice. That's how she spoke. But every morning she would tell me, "You're late." And the first couple of weeks I did, I thought, man, this lady hates me. I don't know, what have I done to her? And the guy that was my supervisor, he's like, no, she does that to everybody. That's just her way of being nice. Well, that's not really being nice, right? I mean, she's like, you're late every time. And so I'm like, man, this lady is ungrateful, right? Do you like being around ungrateful people? No. Nobody likes being around ungrateful people, and no one likes to be ungrateful, or no one likes to be around people who are ungrateful. But you've seen it, right? You've been around them. No matter what happens, no matter what you do, no matter how you try to make it better, they're just ungrateful, right? And if you haven't been around an ungrateful person, maybe you're the person that's ungrateful. I don't know. I'm just saying, maybe it's you, right? But I found. 8 ways to spot an ungrateful person. See if any of these are you. You're never satisfied. I'm not going to call for a show of hands, but you're never satisfied. You're constantly bitter, or you have trouble being just bitter about things. You have a major sense of entitlement. You know what that means? You want things that you don't really deserve, or that you haven't earned, you haven't worked for. You're entitled to it. You could be ungrateful if you're always asking for help from others, but never really giving help in return. You might be, it's like you might be a redneck. Well, you don't know those jokes either, but you might be ungrateful if you, let's see, someone might be ungrateful if you can't help them and they won't let you forget it. In other words, if you might be ungrateful if somebody can't help you in some ways and you just continually bring that up. Like you find ways. Anybody guilty of doing that? I do that to Patrick all the time. Patrick's over here. So I do that to him all the time. And I'm not ungrateful. For some things I am. But anyways, I do that to him all the time. So if you never let them them live it down, right? You could be ungrateful. You might be ungrateful if you just genuinely, this is hard. I don't understand this, but you genuinely don't care about others. I hope nobody in the room is like that. But and you might be ungrateful if you don't if you don't have time for other people unless they show you or they give you something. It wrote it this way: they don't have time for you unless they need something from you. So I'm ungrateful if I don't have time for you unless you show me some love or show me some kindness. You do something good for me, then I'll you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And then you might be ungrateful if you always play the victim. It's always somebody else's fault, right? It's always listen. And sometimes it's not everybody else's fault. Sometimes it's our own fault, right? So we've talked about giving thanks the last couple of weeks and what that means. We've read a couple passages of Scripture and we've looked at some. Both of them are from Paul, and he writes in like 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 18. He talks about how to give thanks in all circumstances. And some of this won't be on the screen, but remember we said that the very first week, and we said, how is that possible? Because everything is not good, right? All of our circumstances are not good. They change. They may be good, but they don't stay there, right? They change from good to bad. Sometimes they get worse before they ever get better again. And we said that the only way that this is possible is that through what we read out of 1 Thessalonians 5, that prayer must be a priority in your life. It has to be a priority in your life if you are truly going to be thankful in all circumstances. It has to be, we have to bathe everything in prayer. Secondly, we said that your joy has to be particular. In other words, we have to find our joy not in our circumstances, but what? In our Savior. Because our Savior doesn't change. Our situation does. Our Savior never does. So our joy can't be found. And listen, we can find joy and we can find fulfillment in the world, but it doesn't last, does it? We've all tried it. And we've all been successful in that probably for a little while. But it just doesn't last because it was never meant to bring lasting fulfillment and lasting joy. Our joy has to be particular in the fact that we find our joy in a relationship with Christ, not in the situations around us, because we know those change from time to time often. And the last thing we said, we have to trust that God has a plan. We can't see the end, right? We don't have the luxury of knowing what God knows. We don't have the luxury of seeing what God sees. God sees why you're going through a situation that you're going through. We don't always see it when we're in the middle of the situation, right? It's like I told you that one week. It's like trying to put a puzzle together, but you don't have the box, right? You don't even know what the puzzle's supposed to look like. How frustrating is that, right? And so you try to put all these, and you can't do it, right? Because we don't have the luxury. That's how life is for us. We don't have the luxury of seeing the end result, what it's supposed to look like at the end, necessarily, our lives. But God does. He sees, and we just have to trust Him. Even when we don't see it, even when it doesn't make sense to us, we trust that He has a plan. And it's easy to stand here and say that. It's easy for us to, shake our heads and, yeah, that's true. But it's, and I'm not making fun of anybody who's doing that. I'm just saying it's a total different thing to live it out, isn't it? To really trust God. That's hard to do. Because all of our situations and all the circumstances in life don't lead us instantly to just say, okay, God, I trust you with this. That's difficult. So last week we took it a step further. And we looked at Colossians chapter 2, and we talked about, are we really thankful? And if we're really thankful, in fact, I asked the question kind of, are you thankful really? I mean, are you really thankful? And if you really are, and not just you, I'm not preaching to you, I'm just speaking for all of us. If we were really thankful, some things would look different in our lives, I think. I'm not saying you're not a thankful person. And if we really, as a culture, as a Christian nation, whatever you want to call it, if we were really thankful, things would look a little different according to Colossians 2, verse 6 and 7 was what we read. And we said the first thing is that we would walk or look more like Jesus. When you see the word walk in Scripture, remember I said that's talking about how you live your life. The way you walk is how you live your life. We would live more like Jesus. We would look more like Jesus on a day-to-day basis. Things that typically tend to bother us. They wouldn't not that everything's going to go perfectly. You're still going to go through difficulty. You remember we talked about that, where Jesus, part of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7, he says that the wind blows and against the evil person and the good person. And the storms come on the evil person and the good person. And it rattles both of their houses, but the person that builds his foundation, and this is just a rough translation here, so this is neither inerrant or infallible. Okay, this is my translation. But he said, if you build the person who builds your foundation on the sand, it's going to fall. But if you build it on the Word of God, on the solid foundation, it will stand. Everyone will go through storms. Everyone. But it's where are we planted? Are we firmly planted in God and in His Word? It doesn't mean that things will always go your way. It just means when things don't go your way, you have God to rely on. You have God to stand on. And listen, we can, even through the difficulty, we can walk more like Jesus. It doesn't mean we like everything that happens. It just means that we will look more like Him when things come our way. We can still be thankful. Secondly, the only way we can be really thankful is to be grounded in our faith. If we are grounded in our faith, when those difficulties come, it's not going to knock us off our feet. Like I said, it's not going to knock us off of our feet. We are grounded in our faith. And yes, we'll get blown from side to side. And yes, we'll face those storms. Yes, we're going to face difficulty. But we can face it because we're grounded. And then the last thing we said is that when we are really thankful, we're easy to spot. Just like I talked about just a minute ago, the list I read from an ungrateful person is sometimes it's easy to spot, isn't it? If we are thankful, if we are a thankful person, that should be easy to spot as well. And one thing about ungratefulness that I've realized, it's like a lot of other things that are negative, maybe even on the verge of sinful in our lives. It's a whole lot easier to spot in other people than it is in ourselves, isn't it? Boy, I can spot somebody that's ungrateful real quick, or I can spot somebody that's prideful like that in somebody else. I don't always see it when I look in the mirror, right? So that's one of those things. It's easy to see in other people, but don't be too quick to think that, hey, that's not inside of us, because we may be carrying that same trait. We may be carrying that same characteristic. So tonight, we're going to look about what if we struggle with being thankful? What if we struggle with being ungrateful at times? And listen, we all go through that, I think. We all go through that. So I hope you know me. I'm going to read a passage from 2 Timothy chapter 3. And this has nothing to do really with thankfulness. So, and what I mean by I hope you know that I never want to take God's word and take it out of context and make it say what I want it to say. I don't know that I could do that anyways. People are skilled enough to do that. I don't know that I'm skilled enough to do that. But I never want to take it out of context and put it and spin it in a way that I think, I want it to fit this message. That's not my intent. And so this message really, this passage is written to a young pastor from Paul. And we live in Paul's letters, it seems like. But there's a good, what better place to live, right? So he's talking to this young Timothy. He's writing it to Timothy. It's the second letter that he wrote to Timothy. And he's writing about the godliness or godlessness, really, in the last days. In the last days. Now, this is not I don't know if we're in the last days. I think obviously we're getting closer and closer because every day gets closer and closer, right? So I'm not saying the world's going to end or Christ is coming back, on a certain day. I do believe he's coming back. I don't know when that is. He hasn't given me that information. If he does, I will be the first to let you know, I promise. But we are living in godless days. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, we're living in days when it's very acceptable, in fact, even encouraged from media or from just our culture to not have godly values, right? I mean, you guys are inundated with culture. You know what I'm talking about. You know it even more than I do. We're encouraged. It's like you can't go anywhere, or you can't watch anything without having that just kind of thrust. And I'm not talking about any one particular area of godlessness. It's all there, right? And it's thrust in us, and it takes that passage of being in the world but not of the world, right? Boy, it puts that a whole new level there, because that's hard to do. I'm not saying it's harder now than it was years ago, but it sure does feel like, because we are so surrounded, everything is instantaneous, right? Social media is there, and it's just we're always connected to everything. Anything that happens, we hear about it right away, right? Because social media. So anything that happens negative, especially, we don't always hear the good things. We always hear the negative things. We always hear, and sometimes it feels like those are being pushed, and it's an agenda that the media or the world is just sending our way. And so we're forced to live in that. Well, I don't know how I got off on that. That was a preaching tangent there. I'm sorry, I'm getting off my soapbox. Let me step down for a minute. So this passage is talking about godlessness in last days, but he also talks about what are present in people when those when it is in the last days. And I think I can make a connection, and again, not taking it out of context, but I want to make a connection from this letter from Paul, this short passage from Paul, and how what being ungrateful, the dangers of being ungrateful. Okay, so you ready? Here we go. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 through 5. He says, "But understand this, in the last days there will come times of difficulty." We all know that, right? We've been through difficulty. "For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents." And I'm sure none of you in the room have ever been disobedient to your parents. "Ungrateful, unholy, heartless." The Hebrew just really doesn't mix any words here. "Heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, this is key, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power." And then he says, "Avoid such people." Let's pray real quick. Father, thank you for your word. Lord, I pray that you will open our eyes and our ears and our hearts tonight, that we would hear, all of us would hear a word from you, not from me, but from you. Lord, speak to us now. Father, we are listening. We are your servants. We want to hear from you. Speak to us through your word tonight. We ask these things in your name. Amen. So, what are some dangers of being ungrateful? Number 1, in verse 2, he says it causes us to love ourselves. It causes us to love things we were never meant to love. And yes, we should. I've always said we're not to be. We're to be content, or we're to be. We're not going to be content with where we are. I think Christ came very clear. John 10:10 says he came that we would have abundant life, and that's not settling for less. But we are to be content with who we are. And Paul says here in verse 2, "For people will be lovers of self." In other words, we'll put too much stock in ourselves, and we'll put ourselves up on a pedestal. That's pride. That's pride. Pride is this. Listen, pride is the quality or state of being proud, obviously, or such as an inordinate self-esteem. Quit laughing at me, Ashlyn. I said it the wrong word. But inordinate self-esteem. Here's what inordinate means. You may be like me, and I read that, and I thought, I don't really know what that is. That like a Christmas decoration? Inordinate? I didn't know what that meant. So here's what it means. Inordinate means exceeding reasonable limits. So you put those two together, it means you think too much of yourself. You're exceeding reasonable limits. If you're ungrateful, you kind of you love yourself too much. Nothing is more important than self. Listen to what the writer of Proverbs says. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction. Your translation say, pride goes before what? The fall. Destruction happens. And then he says, a haughty spirit before a fall. Pride leads to destruction. Pride in our lives. And listen, I think, and I don't really have a biblical basis for this or to show you biblically what I mean by this, but I think there's a pride that is not evil or not sinful, but this is not the pride we're talking about here. What I mean by that is I'm proud of my children, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm proud of you. Bless you. I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud of some things that have happened in life, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And what he's saying here is when you're putting too much emphasis on self, and you become prideful, and nothing else really matters. You take precedence. In yourself, you take precedence over anything else. That's pride, and that's sinful. And when we struggle, when we become ungrateful, it causes us to love ourselves or just love things that we were never meant to love, because he goes on a list of things. And then Proverbs 16 verse 5 says this, everyone who is arrogant in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Everyone, listen, that's pretty clear cut, right? That doesn't need a lot of explanation right there. Explanation. Everyone who is arrogant of heart is an abomination to the Lord. And then he says, be assured, you're not going to go unpunished. There will be some consequences to our prideful actions if we love ourselves too much. Be careful, because ungratefulness can lead us down a path of just loving ourselves too much, thinking that we are more important than anything else. And then, like I said, he lists a few things, but we'll get into those in just a minute. Secondly, being ungrateful can cause us to lose self-control. Look at what he lists in verse 3. He says, into verse 2, he talks about all of those lovers of money. That's something we weren't meant to love money. Money's not bad, but remember what Scripture says. It's not money that's bad. It's the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not money, but we were never meant to love that. So it causes us, like back to point 1, causes us to love things that we were never meant to love. Ourselves, money. It causes us to be proud, to be arrogant, to be abusive, to be ungrateful, unholy, all of that. And then in verse 3, where he talks about, which causes us to lose self-control, he talks about you're heartless, you're unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, you're brutal, you're not loving good, you're treacherous. Look at all of those things. Look at this list. Listen, when we are ungrateful, this is a horrible list, right? But it's easy to spot. And like I said, it's sometimes easy to spot in other people. We can see that in other people. I could see very easily that lady that worked at Comfort Inn or Comforts, wherever I was that I delivered those papers. She wasn't a very grateful person. I don't know what her deal was, but she wasn't very grateful that I was there at 3 o'clock in the morning delivering her a paper. So it's easy to see, right? When we have a bad experience somewhere, it's easy to see, Like if we have a bad encounter with someone, we can see their ungratefulness in them. That's easy to spot. We have to be careful because it causes us ungratefulness. Being ungrateful causes us to lose self-control. Look at James chapter 4, verse 4. It says, you adulterous people. He's talking about being in love with the world here, but he says, you adulterous people do not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God. It puts a division between you and God, between us and God. Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy with God. If you love the world more, it's impossible to love God the way that God intends for us to love him, because other things are more important to us, because we become ungrateful and we lose self-control, and we desire things that we don't really need, that we never were meant to desire. Another passage, 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 and 16 say this. If I can get there. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes, desires of flesh and desires of the eyes and pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. You see, when we begin to love things of the world and that pride sits in, we lose self-control, because that takes over. The love of the world is so important, and the love of the world of earthly things, material things, which none of that is bad in and of itself, but when we put it in higher regard than anything else, especially in our relationship with the Lord, then that's where it becomes an issue, and that's what can cause us to be ungrateful. Because why? We're not grateful for what we do have. And we have a lot to be grateful for. We have a lot to be thankful for. And I don't know where you are in life. I don't know what's going on in your life. Not all of you. I know some of you may be going through some difficult times. I get that. I've been through difficult times too. We'll go through them again. We're not done. As long as we're on this earth, as long as we're forced to live here, we're going to go through difficulty. The Scripture promises us that. But he also promises that if we face the difficulty, God will be with us and he will walk through those difficult times with us. And we don't have to be ungrateful. We can be grateful for what God has done. My mom passed away. I was working on I'm preaching at church on Sunday, the December 15th, and it's her birthday. My mom passed away over 23 years ago. And December 15th would be her 81st birthday. And listen, I think I've told you some about her before. She was my spiritual rock. You know, she kind of held everyone together. She was the glue, you know, and she died just a horrible death with cancer. Cancer was just kind of just all over her body. But so that could very easily, when you lose somebody that you love. Now, I'm so thankful that she had a relationship with Christ, and I will see her again one day. I'm thankful for that. But listen, when you lose somebody you love, it's easy to become, how are you thankful for that, right? It's easy to get trapped up in this ungrateful attitude, and maybe just a hateful attitude, maybe. So we have to find a way, and I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it's going to happen instantly, but we have to find a way to not be sorry for the time that we are missing, but grateful for the time that we had. Grateful that I had her for 58 years. Well, not that I wasn't 58, but she was 58 when she died. Grateful that I had her for the 28 years I think that I was alive when she passed away when I was 28. I'm grateful for that. So we have to find a way, even in the midst of difficulty, to not love things of the world. And we'll be tempted to do that. The enemy will tempt us when things aren't going well. Just start loving things of the world a little bit, enticing you. And it's not bad to have stuff, okay? That's not the point. The point is when we put precedence of those things of the world, anything of the world takes precedence over our relationship with Christ. That's where the issues start to happen. So be careful, because being ungrateful can cause us to lose our self-control and love things that we were never meant to love. To love things that were never meant to bring us fulfillment. They will bring us fulfillment momentarily, possibly, but it's not going to last because they were never meant to. And then the last thing, being ungrateful can cause us, we have to be careful because it causes us to be conceited. Look at verse 4. He says, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit. Swollen, you're just filled up with conceit. You're conceited. He says, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. That's that. You love things of the world more than you love things of God. We have that tendency. Remember, because we're in the world, we're just not of the world. But we are in the world. We're inundated with the world. It's hard to not love things of the world. But he says, if we truly are thankful, we truly are grateful, then we won't love things of the world more than we love God. He says, you see it, the prideful. This is an issue of pride again. And I love, there's a couple of verses, 2 Corinthians 12, Paul writes and he says, so to keep me from being conceited. Listen, Paul even knew within it, and this was Paul who wrote most of the New Testament, who was, he's mentioned everywhere. He mentored all kinds of people. He was a hero of the faith, right? He in his law that he could be conceited at times. He had a tendency, if he wasn't careful, if he wasn't cautious, if he wasn't focused, if he wasn't staying in the Word with the Word that he had at that time, he could be conceited. So he says, to keep me from becoming conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to harass me. So something was given. We don't know exactly what it was. And I think there's a reason for that. So we can all relate, kind of what I think. I think Paul doesn't describe exactly what the thorn in the flesh was for him. Because if he did, then we just couldn't relate to it in some areas. Some of us could, but not all of us. With this, all of us, because we all have something that keeps rearing its ugly head in our lives, don't we? Whether it's pride, jealousy, fear, anxiety, whatever it is, we all have something that we struggle with, that we deal with it's when Paul talks about I die daily. Now he's talking about I die to myself and all, but I think that's part of it too. We have to put that thing that we struggle with, that sin that Hebrews talks about, that sin that easily entangles us or easily trips us up. We have to put that behind us. Paul is saying, look, to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in the flesh. Now, he doesn't say that God gave it to him. He says here that the messenger of Satan, it was sent by a messenger of Satan. But listen, don't you think that God could have stopped that if he wanted to? Absolutely. Satan's powerful, but he's not all powerful. God is. God could have stopped that. But for some reason, God saw that Paul needed that, apparently. Satan brought it, but God allowed it. I think that's one of the places where I've landed, where I've always felt like, and I've said this to you before, I've never felt comfortable saying that God causes bad things in our life. I don't know where I land theologically on that, to be honest with you. But I believe with all of my heart that God allows us to go through difficulty. Not that he causes it, but I think that he allows us to go through difficulty so that we will see him in a different way that we would ever have seen him otherwise. And sometimes we need that. We're like Paul. To keep us from becoming conceited and loving ourselves too much, God allows us to go through something that brings us down a level. It says, you know what, I'm really not all that. I'm loving myself a little too much here. The pride and conceit, it's not a new thing. Paul was dealing with that. It's been around for a while. Look at Romans chapter 12, verse 2 and 3. How do we combat this? This conceitedness, this pride. Paul says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed. How? By the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. By the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly, don't miss this, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. How do we keep from becoming ungrateful? We don't conform to the world, to the patterns of the world. We conform by renewing our mind. We conform to God's standard by renewing our minds, allowing God to renew our minds. And then we think of others first. Don't think too highly of yourself. We have to have an others first attitude towards life. I may have told you this. I was really convicted several weeks ago, and this is not something I'm sharing. Just it was an opportunity that I had that I missed to be an example of Christ to somebody. I was getting my oil changed, and I'm not a real guy, so I go to the Jiffy Lube or wherever. I don't do it my own, but I used to, but I don't anymore. So I'm sitting there waiting on my car, the oil to get changed, and there was a lady that came in, and she was at the counter asking Mr. Joe, the guy that we go to, asking him how much it cost, and he told her, and she said, "Okay, I need to get my oil changed, but I don't, I don't have." She was. Through the conversation, I could hear she was. This was when GM was on strike, and she was a worker at GM. And she said, "Okay, let me think about it, and I'll be back to see because I need to get it changed, but I just don't. I'm just kind of on a fixed income right now." So she left, and she went out and sat in her car, and I thought, man, I had a perfect opportunity. Nobody knew it. Nobody was going to know it. And I know Joe real well. I could have gone up and said, "Joe, hey, let me just bless her," But we had it, we could have done it, but I did, and I sat there and wrestled with that. In that little waiting room that wasn't even as big as half the size of this stage. I mean, I'm just sitting there, and thinking, why am I struggling with this? But I never acted upon it. And I don't know if that was pride. I don't know if that was me just not having enough faith. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't good. I had the opportunity to bless somebody without them even knowing it. And I missed the moment. I missed having an opportunity to be used by God to bless somebody else. And I think what kept me. Was it because I was ungrateful? Or I had a hint of ungratitude in my own life? I don't know, but I wasn't proud of myself, I can tell you that. I felt ashamed because I could have done something, and I chose not to. Begin this series, we started with a verse in 1 Thessalonians 5:18. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ for you. When we are ungrateful, it is hard to be thankful. When we allow life to cause us to be ungrateful, I think it's probably impossible to be thankful. There's great danger, okay? There's great danger when we allow life to cause us to be ungrateful, because it causes us to do things. It causes us to make decisions that are not godly. So that day in the quick lube oil change or wherever, there was obviously something that was going on in my life that I was just not in a very grateful attitude. And it caused me to miss an opportunity. to be an example of Christ to somebody. And when you're ungrateful, I don't know that you can give thanks in all circumstances, like Paul commanded. This is not a suggestion, by the way. 1 Thessalonians 5. It's not just, if you can, give thanks. It's not a suggestion. It's a command from Scripture. Are you thankful? Or are you just have an ungrateful spirit? And I'm not talking about moments of ungratefulness. I think we all will go through that from time to time. We're not grateful for everything. I get that. I'm talking about having that attitude of just being ungrateful. Be careful, because there's a lot of dangers that come along with that. So let me leave you with this. When have you noticed in yourself that you have been ungrateful? What caused it? What brought you there? What happened that led you to that feeling of just being ungrateful? Was it a circumstance of life that you had no control over? Maybe you did have some control over it, and it was still a circumstance of life, but something caused you to get there. What was it? And then ask yourself this: how can you or I, how can we put it in the first person, how can I be grateful no matter what the circumstance? In any circumstance, I want to be grateful. Not because this circumstance is fun, not because this circumstance is enjoyable, because we said, and you've lived long enough, it's not going to be. Every circumstance is not going to be. But we can still be grateful because God has seen us fit to go through that circumstance, no matter what it is. He has seen that we are able to go through it and will love us through it. Remember, I said the last verse in verse 5, he talks about having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. I think we need to be careful there too. We all have, I think, for the most part, we all have good intentions, don't we? Right? Most of us do. Somebody comes to you and listen, this is from me as much as it is for you. Somebody comes to you with something and they're like, I'll be praying for you about that. We have good intentions. And on the outside, everything looks pretty good. Right? But he says the appearance looks good. But your actions, our actions sometimes deny the power. I had an opportunity to bless somebody for 50, 60, I don't even know how much it was, for oil change. And I didn't do it. I look good on the, well, I don't always look good, but I look spiritually on the outside. But I'm not always ready to bless somebody, or I'm not always ready to be used by God. Be grateful for what He has done and share that with other people, what He has done in your life. Let me pray for you.